Regis, oh Regis, an old friend and faithful companion, a judicious and kind comrade, a voice of conscience and reason, a man who would never betray his ideals, a vampire who is the epitome of humanity. You might ask, can a monster be human? Can a bloodthirsty beast be sane and humane? And what might that cost him? And the answer is yes. The soul of any creature, even the most dangerous looking one, often contains so much light and warmth that it would be enough for a whole city of callous, heartless people. People who would kill for a few coins, rob the defenseless, mock the weak. The best example of a sincerely humane monster who chose this path on his own is a higher vampire named Regis of Godfroy, a good friend of the witcher Geralt of Rivia, a powerful beast that chose to be a hermit, a herbalist, and a healer, that swore to avoid killing and deliberately refused to drink human blood. Regis is trying to redeem himself, to atone for the mistakes of his youth when he hunted people indiscriminately, treating men, women, and children like dumb cattle, just like his kin. And it is this remorse that makes him so human, trying to change his violent nature, accepting all the sacrifices that must be made to achieve it. Many stories about the vampire Regis have already been told in the Witcher games and books, but today we're going to tell you another one, much less known story. This story is about the adventures of two vampires together, Regis and Detlaff. You too have wondered how exactly Detlaff saved Regis and how these two such different vampires became friends, haven't you? Well, not too long ago, the CD Projekt Red studio shed some light on this story in the adventure for their Gwent game, and today the old Witcher will tell this story. Do stock up on some supplemento as you peer into the shadows of the night. Tonight we will tell you the unknown story of the vampire Regis. Regis's journey. All the fans of the Witcher universe might remember Regis's path from a bloodthirsty young vampire that killed innocents to the moment when he was caught by humans, had his head chopped off, and got buried underground. For decades, Regis has been regenerating, rebuilding his body, and over the years he completely rethought his life. He renounced violence. He began to live a low-key life. Helping people whenever he could, and became known as a herbalist and a healer, saving lives, redeeming himself. At some point on his journey, he met a certain gray-haired witcher who was known as the White Wolf, and Regis found a kindred spirit in him. He revealed to Geralt of Rivia his true nature, joined his cause, became quite useful, helped Geralt out of many troubles. Thanks to Regis, Geralt eventually found Ciri, defeated the sorcerer Vilgefortz, and was able to leave the Stygia castle alive, together with his dearest people. And as for Regis, oh well, Regis, trying to help the Witcher in his battle against the biggest evil in his path so far, the vampire died. At least we all thought he died for years. Regis met his near-final death at the hands of a great sorcerer named Vilgefortz of Rivia. Many years passed since that very moment that got described in Andrzej Sapkowski's books, when Vilgefortz literally melted the body of the higher vampire into the column of the Stygia castle. For more than 15 years, all fans of the Witcher universe thought that their favorite vampire was irretrievably lost. But then the game The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt got released, and after some time the world saw the DLC called Blood and Wine. And the developers from CD Projekt Red brought Regis back to us, exactly as we imagined him to be, literally from the pages of the book saga. The joy was unbounded. Regis is definitely one of the most memorable and enjoyable characters in the saga, but along with the joy came questions. How did Regis survive? How is it explained? To what limit does a vampire's body need to be destroyed so that it cannot be reborn? And if a small piece of his body is enough to regenerate him, how do you even kill a higher vampire? Some of these questions were answered in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. For example, it became clear that a higher vampire can kill another higher vampire for good if he drinks all the blood from his body, because blood is literally a prerequisite for a vampire's life, the only one. The other questions were only indirectly answered. We learned that Regis had been saved by a vampire called Detlaff. He nursed Regis for more than a year until the latter came to his senses and was able to walk, but we had no more details until recently. Because now we know the whole story of the adventures of Regis and Detlaff right after Regis recovered a little and decided to settle in his house in Dillingen, right after Regis and Detlaff became hunted down. After all, it turns out that it wasn't just Detlaff who had a hand in Regis's revival. Regis Reborn. This story began in Stygia Castle, right after the sorceresses of the Lodge learned of the location of Vilgefortz's lair. They sent a mission there. Naturally, it was necessary to investigate a fortress overflowing with so many secrets, and after all that had happened, it was worth razing the structure to the ground. Stygia Castle stood indestructible and seemingly eternal, an empty ghost of the past, a husk. But no, not quite empty. It held parts of a creature that could not be killed so easily, the remains of the higher vampire Regis. The sorceress Sabrina Glavisic claimed that it was the Lodge that discovered these remains. According to her, the sorceresses collected everything that was left of Regis and brought it all to Monte Calvo. There, allegedly, it was them who magically helped Regis to regenerate and, in fact, brought him back to life. Can we believe Sabrina? Who knows? Regis himself, for example, will tell us a few years later that only Detlaff was involved in his resurrection. He won't mention the sorceresses. Well, we are likely to make the choice of who to believe in the upcoming projects of the CD Projekt Red, but for now, let us return to our story, for here's where both versions agree. According to Sabrina's story, the sorceresses wanted to find out what Regis knew about Vilgefortz and his death in Stygia Castle, but he was able to escape the Lodge. Or maybe his escape was aided, for he was really weak after he came to his senses. Sabrina hired a witcher to find and kill an escaped vampire, a monster slayer named Sorensen. She promised the mutant a royal bounty on the head of the higher vampire. Escape from the witcher. Then there was pain, suffering, and escape. For in both stories, there comes a moment when Regis and Detlaff find themselves together. Regis is weak, he cannot even walk properly. And Detlaff cares for him as if he were his own child. Together, they ended up in Temeria. They traveled from town to town, never staying anywhere for long. It went on for a long time, months, maybe a year. They needed blood, lots of blood. Without blood, Regis couldn't recover, for blood was the essence and power of every vampire, no matter how much the vampire tried to hide it. During one of their stops in a town near Sodden, Detlaff and Regis were caught. Sorensen quickly found the vampire's trail. He arrived in the town just as panic was setting in. There were rumors that a monster had taken up residence in the local bell tower of the Eternal Fire cult, that it was snatching people from the street at night, that it dragged them upstairs and devoured them. All the attempts to ambush the creature were unsuccessful. The wounds left by the iron were no more of a problem to the monster than the bites of the local mosquitoes. They didn't even cause the vampire much discomfort. It was clear that the Witcher's services were needed. So when a certain monster slayer named Sorensen quite fortunately arrived in the city just in the hour of need, no one chased the goddamn mutant away. Even the Reverend Father of the Eternal Fire cult had accepted the Witcher's presence, and that spoke volumes. Together with the mayor of the town, they promised the Witcher a couple hundred gold pieces for a much-needed job, and he agreed. He could use a little extra something to add up to Sabrina's reward. The Reverend Father had even agreed to provide a few boys from the church choir. He was sure that the sacred prayer would drive the monster out of the bell tower, or at least deprive the bloodsucker of its strength. Surprisingly, the Witcher agreed to such help. The priest was pleased. He didn't know that the Witcher didn't really believe that prayer could chase the creature away. The monster slayer decided to use the boys as bait, and the plan worked. When the boys from the choir came to the bell tower at night and began to sing, the Witcher hid and waited. His sword was already at the ready, and his veins were already flowing with elixirs. The wait was not long. Soon enough, the praise of the Eternal Fire was replaced by yells, screams, and the sound of running footsteps. The time had come. The euphoria they experience while feeding overwhelms their senses, makes them lethargic. This is the best time to attack. Sorensen emerged from behind a stone gargoyle, curling up into a throw like a discobolus. The chain whirred through the air. The links twisted around the creature's limbs, skin hissing against silver. The Garashami fell, rolled down the sloping roof of the temple, collapsed onto the cobblestone street below, taking a downpour of tiles with him. The Witcher gave chase down the gutter. Time to finish the job. He drew his silver sword and struck the neck of the creature struggling in its bonds. But a moment before, the vampire broke free of the silver's tight embrace. The blow struck him in his stomach, where the wound opened. It left a pool of blood on the ground. The vampire screamed. This wound was not like the injuries he had received before and could easily heal. This wound was left by a silver blade. The vampire took off, its wings sizzling through the air. The Witcher drew his crossbow instantly, loaded a bolt, and shot it. The muffled sound of the impact was the evidence of a hit. The vampire flapped its wings once more and fell straight to the top floor of the bell tower. The Witcher didn't waste a second. He grabbed the cable of the construction hoist and chopped it with his sword to get rid of the counterweight. Brakes tumbled to the ground and the hoist soared to the top floor of the bell tower. Leaping out of the opening, Sorensen saw only a huge winged figure moving away from the city in a westerly direction. It was well lit by the moon, and it looked like it was carrying something. There were bodies thrown around, human bodies, all with their spines broken, so they could not move or fight back. It looked as if a bird had brought its chicks' worms pecked all out at once. They had vampire teeth marks on their necks, different kinds of marks. Well, there was only one conclusion. There are at least two vampires. One was nursing the other. Sorensen cursed. Detlaff and the humans. Detlaff and Regis found themselves in a field hospital in Sodden. There had been some kind of battle recently, and the corpses of soldiers were lying all over the place. The Temerian army, however, wasn't there. Strange, but it's the kind of place where they looked like they belonged, battered and scattered. And Detlaff had a gruesome wound on his side that wouldn't heal. That left the vampire puzzled. It festers, Regis stated discerningly. How is this possible? I can't close it. And when I tried to transform, I felt it tear more. I don't understand. It was only a human. No, not a human. A Witcher. Detlaff shot his companion a look in which reluctance fought hopelessly against curiosity. They are mutants adapted to kill. A guild called on to protect this world from visitors from other spheres, Regis explained. From us. Us too, indeed. Over the centuries, they have accumulated considerable knowledge of those they consider enemies. You experience that expertise firsthand. Therefore, I recommend extreme caution. The muscles in Detlaff's jaw twitched as he brooded over his companion's words. Let it be your way, he said finally. The whole hospital was filled with wounded, and Detlaff ordered to drink them. After all, they were going to die anyway, but Regis was adamant. No, he said. From the moment Regis regained full consciousness, from the moment he realized where he was and who was helping him, from the moment he'd gotten back on his feet, from that moment, Regis had refused human blood. Detlaff didn't understand his friend and brethren. He had sacrificed much to bring Regis back to life, to bring him back to this world, gave him his blood to drink, tried to seek out humans whose blood could help Regis recover, bringing them to the unconscious friend. But right now, he just didn't know what was happening. Regis just kept waving him off and remembered to remind him about the Witcher. If the vampires leave behind a mountain of corpses, the Witcher would quickly find the bloodsuckers. Otherwise, they do have a chance to escape, hiding among the humans. When the novice from the temple of Melitele entered the tent, the vampires had already reached a consensus. They would proceed quietly. They checked with the novice to see if there were any travelers in the area they could pick up on their way to Dillingen. Regis had something like a safe haven in that town. The girl told about 3 soldiers who took their wounded commander and headed for the city. Regis and Detlaff followed their trail. Traveling in company, they hoped not to arouse suspicion. Too bad they didn't know the essence of those they chose to join. The trio of soldiers that took their commander with them were made up of deserters. When the commander was still active, it told these 3 that he had once robbed a village with a company of soldiers and had safely hidden all the most valuable things in some treasure box. It was clear to those 3 that this treasure had to be found. Of course, the last thing the deserters thought about was saving the life of their commander. 2 men, enterprising Erskine, an unscrupulous Ozian, and a woman, cunning and no less unscrupulous Neris. They wanted only one thing, that the commander would not die before showing them the place where the treasure was hidden. And so they dragged his body on a sled with wounds and fever to the village where the treasure should be. Yes, it's a pity Detlaff and Regis didn't know about it. The vampires caught up with the trio of soldiers in the evening, just as they had broken camp. At first, they didn't want to let anyone join them, but then Regis told them that he was a healer and could help the dying commander. Thinking that they really needed the commander and that he might not make it to the location of the treasure, the trio decided to take companions. The company wouldn't talk. The vampires stayed away, and the marauding soldiers didn't know who they were dealing with, thinking Regis and Detlaff were just oddballs, but they were tolerable, especially since Regis was very attentive in his healing work and literally brought life back into the almost chilled body of the commander. Nevertheless, he could not come to his senses yet. Meanwhile, the travelers found a lonely hut. A man and his daughter lived there. The owner welcomed the travelers into his house and treated them to beer, but inside the deserters showed their true nature. Erskine gulped, wiped the foam off his mustache. He tapped the lilac patch on the table with his finger. Well, right, I have already explained. We are the Temerian army, and we've been given a covert mission to carry this captive, ransomed from Nilfgaardians. We must get him across the Ina as soon as possible. That's why we need your carriage. And both horses, Ossian said. Nerys was standing by the door, her back propped against the wall. In her hand, she was holding a bare sword, which she was picking between the floorboards. And the contents of the pantry, she added. It is not right. How can we survive without a carriage in winter, here in such remote parts? We? Ossian asked. Who else? The farmer glanced towards the door. Ossian spat, pulled out a dagger, and put it on the table. The furnace fires flickered on the flat of the blade. Good people have mercy. We are not good people. It would be such a pity for you to find out exactly why that is. It's gonna be trouble. But Detlaff suddenly took out a purse of gold from his pocket and came to the table and offered the old man a coin. He stated, in a voice that did not tolerate bickering, that their company would not take anything from the old man. Instead, they would buy it. For 1 gold coin, 1 mare. He could keep the other one. The old man was happy, the deserters as well. For some reason, they decided not to fight back. 1 gold coin for 1 mare. Enough to pull a sled with a wounded commander. It's true, isn't it? Why did Detlaff do this? The answer to the question was now hiding in the forest. A girl named Ain was gathering firewood, and she was about to return home to her father. But then she felt someone's presence. She didn't even notice how the stranger approached her. You'd better wait here, said a voice from behind her, low, mesmerizing. But my father! The stranger put a hand on her shoulders, cold and pale, bloodstains on the palms. He'll be fine. They will be gone soon. Look, take a good look. This world of yours where nothing is simple. I do not understand. Never mind. The girl was silent. She watched the gray-haired man take something from his purse and put it in her father's hand. Gold flashed. They will only take Lotka? She asked after a moment. Yes, my friend has the gift of persuasion. That's good. Good? You were lucky. They wanted to rob you. Ain turned out and looked the stranger in his eyes. But someone was watching over us. With the mare, their journey quickened. The deserters themselves now tried to keep away from their mysterious companions. But at last they came to the river. It was necessary to find a way to cross to the other side. Since it was early spring and the winter frost was still biting through everything, the river was covered with ice. But the ice was not very reliable. Even from the shore, it was obvious that one should not step on it. Nevertheless, there was no way out. There were Temeria's guard forts on the other side, and the travelers had already been spotted by Temerian soldiers. It was unlikely that the deserters would be spared, so when the 3 riders in Temerian armor approached the travelers, the deserters quickly panicked. Despite Regis's desire to settle the matter peacefully, Ossian suddenly launched a stone from his slingshot directly at one of the soldiers' heads. The second soldier threw himself at Nerys and fell down on the ice with the woman. Of course, the ice cracked under the weight of the 2 of them and the floundering bodies disappeared under the water. The remaining Temerian soldiers rowed back to the military forts, sounding the alarm, and Ossian and Erskine spurred the mare and the makeshift sled and galloped off into the nearest woods. As for Regis, the vampire didn't think for a second. He jumped after Nerys and the soldier and started searching for them in the water. When he found them, he tried to pull them out, but his strength was still lacking. He wasn't even half recovered. Regis felt his shoulder dislocate under the weight of the bodies. But suddenly he was helped. Detlaff's familiar hand touched Regis's shoulder under the water. The second higher vampire had not yet lost his strength. He literally ripped Nerys and the Temerian soldier from each other's clutches and pulled them both out of the water and onto dry land. Already by the river, they could hear that the Temerian guard forts were buzzing like beehives. Time was of the essence. Detlaff left Nerys and Regis. The vampires understood each other half-heartedly. Detlaff himself easily lifted the Temerian soldier in his armor and carried him somewhere. Regis brought Nerys to her senses and ordered her to run after him. She listened. Regis knew where to hide. After all, they were in Sutton, near the inner river, not far from the cursed elven mounds of Fen Karn, and there was his old, long-abandoned hut, a hut that brings back so many memories. The vampire and Nerys were able to escape. Even the soldiers didn't go to Fen Karn. It was a place to be feared. Regis's house stood still, untouched. Inside, there were the same dried herbs and potions. Most importantly, there was still some mandrake moonshine left. A sip of it quickly brought Nerys to her senses. Did the deserter and marauder know what gratitude was? Who knows? But she knew she should stay close to Regis for now. Finally, she noticed that Regis wasn't casting a shadow. She guessed he was a vampire, but she still didn't dare to run. And Detlaff, he came back later in the morning, made sure they weren't being chased. He told them the soldier's body was safe. Detlaff had left him at the military fort. This man would not die. Detlaff tried to do the same thing Regis did, saving humans. He wanted to understand his friend. Paths split. Their journey continued. Now the three of them were walking together. It was not far from Dillingen. That was where Regis had taken refuge. Detlaff had said he knew of places where he could live in peace. But now they had to worry about Regis. Along the way, the trio met some people, right with their belongings and children. They looked like refugees. But the war was over. It turned out that it wasn't the war, but its echoes. A squad of Temerian soldiers had just driven the whole village out of their homes, just to spend the night. The soldiers didn't even provide one house for everyone, so that people wouldn't freeze to death. Upon hearing all this, Regis's face did not change, but his thoughts were unequivocal. They called the Nilfgaardians intruders, she said, bloody invaders. But now the fight with the blacks is over. The country is supposed to be liberated, yet we cannot return to our own huts. Seems to me, we're the ones who lost. Regis grated his teeth. Wait until tomorrow. Return to your homes at dawn. But the military, we tried. Yes, now let me try. Regis couldn't let it go. The village was just around the corner. The vampire entered it and immediately heard the noise coming from the lodge's house. He walked over, knocked, entered. Detlaff and Nerys followed him, but he stopped them, asked them to wait outside, and went inside. He was immediately confronted by soldiers. "Who are you?" asked a bearded man with a scar on his temple. "My name is Emil Regis. I'm traveling to Dillingen." The soldier leaned forward, resting his bristly chin on a plump fist. "Are you going alone? Brave of you. Or stupid?" Another soldier chimed in. "Or stupid indeed," said the bearded man. "You're lost, Emil Regis. But luckily for you, there is a road that leads beyond the hills. Then you just need to go straight on." "I know that. Then why come here? I met some people who you expelled from their homes. Children even were denied shelter." Regis closed the door behind him and approached the table. Tentative fingers drifted toward the hilts of swords. "Those were the orders," said the bearded man. Regis met his eyes and raised his hand. The bottles on the table trembled. "Orders have changed," he croaked. "This place doesn't belong to you. You will depart to Vidord without delay. You will forget our meeting and forget that you were ever here." The bearded man's features loosened and his face lost all expression. Yes, Regis used magic. He could manipulate human minds, their memories and actions. He didn't like to use it, but now he accepted it as the best outcome. The commander agreed. He ordered them to leave, and the soldiers left. Just as the door closed behind them, Regis collapsed. He had no strength left. He was weak. He shouldn't have used his powers. Detlaff ran into the room, quickly took a knife from the table, cut his arm open, let Regis drink his blood, saved him again. This crazy Regis. But Dillingen was so close, and so close is the treasure that the deserted commander hid under Dillingen. Nerys finally spoke. She tried to convince the vampires to go there. She reasoned that the commander was literally a prisoner of Ossian and Erskine. Has Regis been treating the commander all this way for nothing? Would he truly let him die? There was no doubt that the deserters will kill the commander as soon as they find out what the treasure is. Nerys knew those words would work, and they did. It had to be finished. I'm not a monster. Unfortunately, Regis and Detlaff didn't know that the very witcher named Sorensen hadn't left them alone. He was heading west, picking up every rumor. He came across a cabin where an old man told him about the people who had visited him, and even showed him a coin, an old ancient coin, a gold coin. It was 300 years old. This is no ordinary man's coin. This was the trail. Next, the witcher found the Temerian soldiers, who were walking back to the city in some kind of half-slumber, not paying attention to anything that was going on around them. They were bewitched by a vampire. And the next clue was the makeshift sled and the mare. There were tracks here and there on the witch's path. All senses on the maximum, all knowledge activated. He just had to find the vampires. And he did search and he found, but not the vampires yet. After being almost in Dillingen, Sorensen found those very companions of the vampire, at least 2 of them, and they were in trouble. They were surrounded by ghouls, necrophages. One of them, the one on the sled, had already been torn apart. The others needed help. Sorensen flew into the crowd of the monsters like a whirlwind. He chopped and sliced and killed the creatures, doing what he was created to do. And when he stopped, there were only 2 living things in front of him, 2 human beings. And they told their amazing story. The witcher had a plan in his head. The vampires were coming, and he knows what to do. Behind his belt, he kept a dagger. Sabrina Glevisic's magic dagger. It sizzled the flesh of vampires. A powerful weapon. All he had to do is hit the target with the dagger. When Regis, Detlaff, and Neris arrived at the site of the horde near Dillingen, they saw a terrible sight. Mountains of corpses, mauled by the necrophages. The commander, whom they were trying to save, was dead, and there were also lots of necrophages' body leftovers. The witcher, that was his job. It was a trap. The bowstring clicked. The sound was familiar to Detlaff. The bolt shattered Regis's arm. The vampire screamed. Detlaff's eyes filled with blood. He saw where the projectile had come from. The undergrowth stirred for a moment. That was enough. The witcher must be in there. Within a moment, Detlaff turned into his true form. Huge bat wings, horrifying face, claws, skin. He became a monster. Detlaff reared up and darted into the undergrowth. Neris rushed after him with a sword for some reason. The monster took the bait. Sorensen watched it rise to the sky, spread its wings, then disappear into the trees. The condottiere ran after the beast, her sword drawn. The witcher was grateful for this decision. He didn't want to have to kill her. He drank his potion and jumped out from behind a pile of boards. In 2 strides, he reached the vampire still pinned to the sled. One quick blow to behead the bloodsucker. He swung his sword and the silver blade whistled. A heartbeat too slow. Yes, it was a plan. The witch's plan. Fighting 2 higher vampires at once is insane. One had to be lured out. Then there might be a chance. And now, leaping out of hiding, Sorensen attacked the wounded Regis. Regis was his primary target. It was to kill Regis that Sabrina Glevisik had hired the witcher. Lunge, strike. The vampire blocks with claws. A pirouette and a blow. The vampire blocks. Another attack, a feint and a strike. The sword grazes the shin. The vampire hisses in pain. Another blow to the neck. The vampire covers himself with his arm. The sword cuts off the fingers, but the enemy pays no attention. A jump. The vampire leaps at the witcher, claws at Sorensen's throat, who can't move under the weight of the beast. But there is something at the belt. A bomb. A short, imperceptible movement. The bomb falls right under the clashing foes. An explosion. For a few seconds they got blasted away from each other. A white mist filled everything around them. Regis could only see a few cold corpses of necrophages. And then there was the commander's corpse. Warm. Lots of blood in it. He's already dead, Regis thought. It was either death or blood. And Regis crawled. The shin ached terribly, but he sank his teeth into the commander's neck and he felt euphoric. He felt strong. The wounds were healing. His inner power was growing. He could do anything. His face stretched. His claws lengthened. His human feature almost vanished. He turned. The witcher didn't stand a chance anymore. When the fog of the bomb had settled, they ran at each other again, but now Regis was stronger. He dodged Sorensen's blows with ease and was already attacking on his own. Eventually he got close to the witcher. Just a moment. The vampire hit him with a furious blow. Claws pierced his body with ease. His fingers slackened, and the silver blade dropped into red-splattered frost. The beast extended its fangs. The artery was throbbing, the heart beating, blood pumping. It was time to surrender to nature, to do exactly what it was made for. I do not want this. Regis froze, facial features smoothed and softened, claws retracted with a hiss. He released the Witcher, letting him collapse into the snow. He listened to the pre-dawn placidity. Soon the rhythm of beating blood faded, then disappeared entirely. He stooped over the hunter and looked deep into his eyes. "I am not a monster," he said. He turned and walked away into the trees, leaving the Witcher alone. In the woods, Detlaff fought the deserters. He had become disillusioned with men, this time for good. Regis had almost convinced him of the need to sympathize with humans, but now he was under attack. Even Nerys, whom he had saved the life of, had stabbed him in the shoulder with the very same magical dagger. Why would they do that? The treasure just wasn't there, and the Witcher said the vampires have a lot of ancient coins. It's the gold, just the gold. The deserters could have finished Detlaff, but only nailed him to a tree instead, and they began to bicker about how they would divide the gold. And in the meantime, the higher vampire had summoned a pack of real monsters to help him, and they tore the deserters to pieces. All of them were dead now, and Detlaff didn't want to save anyone anymore. He was confident that they deserved their fate. Later, Regis came over. He told that he had let the Witcher go. Detlaff said that he had killed the deserters. They could not continue their journey together any further. Detlaff noted Regis's wounded hand. "The Witcher? I let him go." "You're insane." "No, I'm just not who you thought I was." The sun peeked out from among the trees. A frosty wind blew snow from the leafless branches. Regis climbed to his feet and adjusted his back. "I'm going." Detlaff stared into Nerys' glassy eyes. He reached down and took a coin from between her fingers. "Go," he said. "Live among the humans, among your own. May you not find your end there." They went separate ways. They didn't know if they would see each other again. They were too different. And somewhere far, far away, the Witcher Sorensen was listening to Sabrina Glavisic's curses. Why? Because he refused the order. Witchers only kill monsters. Well, we at the Old Witcher channel did not kill anyone, but instead we offer you to put a like for this video and write a comment about the adventure of Regis and Detlaff. Which one of them do you think did the right thing? Of course, also do hit the bell and subscribe to the channel. We promise to provide you guys with regular and hopefully interesting content. Anyway, thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end, and see you soon when the Old Witcher speaks once more.